May 15, 1943. The cattle train rolls through endless Texas plains, but its cargo isn't livestock. 500 German Afrika Corps prisoners press their faces against barred windows, watching a landscape that defies everything they've been told about America. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber's breath fogs the glass as he stares at his first real American cowboy. The man stands on the Amarillo platform in worn leather chaps and a wide-brimmed hat, rolling a cigarette with weathered fingers, squinting against the desert sun. Not a propaganda poster, not a Hollywood actor, a real cowboy. Weber's mind races back to the briefings in Tunisia. Americans are soft, decadent cowboys and gangsters, the officers had said. A nation of mixed races without culture or honor. They'll treat you like animals. But the first shock had come on the transport ships crossing the Atlantic. White bread, real coffee, 3 hot meals a day, more food than German soldiers had seen in months. The same rations American soldiers received, as required by the Geneva Convention. Weber had eaten better as a prisoner than as a Wehrmacht soldier. Now, through the train windows, contradictions multiply with every mile. Endless farmland stretches to the horizon, herds of cattle that seem to go on forever, oil derricks pumping black gold from the earth, towns with electric lights blazing even in daylight, paved roads cutting straight lines through the wilderness, automobiles everywhere, not just military vehicles, but civilian cars, trucks, tractors. Mein Gott, whispers Unteroffizier Friedrich Becker from the seat beside him. Look at all those cars. Every farmer has one. Weber nods silently. In Germany, only the wealthy owned automobiles. Here they seem as common as bicycles back home. A thought forms in his mind, dangerous and undeniable. The Americans have so much of everything, they even share it with their enemies. The train whistle blows, long and mournful, as they approach another station. Through the speaker, an American voice announces their destination in broken German. Camp Hearn, Texas. Prepare for disembarkation. Weber looks at his reflection in the window, sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, the face of a man who expected to die in the African desert. Instead, he's alive, well-fed, and about to enter a world that Joseph Goebbels insisted didn't exist. The propaganda machine had prepared them for barbarism and torture from the uncultured mongrels of the New World. As the train slows, Weber sees more cowboys on the platform, real ones. They wear the same clothes, carry the same confident bearing, but their faces show curiosity, not hatred. One tips his hat as the prison train passes. Weber closes his eyes and tries to reconcile what he's seeing with everything he's been taught. The America of Nazi propaganda, weak, divided, culturally bankrupt, doesn't match the abundance rolling past his window. This America builds so much it can afford to feed its enemies. This America has cowboys who tip their hats to prisoners of war. The train lurches to a stop. Outside, American guards speak in calm voices, not the harsh barking Weber expected. No attack dogs, no machine guns pointed at the windows. Just tired-looking soldiers doing their job, some barely older than Weber himself. As he stands to gather his meager possessions, Weber realizes that everything he thought he knew about America was wrong. The question now is, what else was wrong? What other lies had he been told? What other truths had been hidden? The doors open with a metallic screech, and Texas heat floods the car. Weber steps toward an uncertain future, leaving behind not just the train, but the worldview that had defined his young life. Behind him, 499 other German prisoners face the same reckoning. The cowboy on the platform stubs out his cigarette and walks away, whistling a tune Weber doesn't recognize. It sounds like freedom. The convoy of buses winds through cotton country under the blazing Texas sun. Weber stares through dusty windows at a landscape that seems designed to shatter every preconception. This isn't the Wild West of dime novels or the barbaric wasteland of Nazi propaganda. It's something else entirely, organized, prosperous, vast beyond imagination. Camp Hearn appears on the horizon like a mirage, but instead of machine gun towers and attack dogs, Weber sees what looks like a small American town dropped into the middle of nowhere. Neat rows of barracks stretch in orderly lines. Electric wires connect every building. American flags flutter in the hot breeze. The buses rumble through the main gate. No snarling guards, no brutal shouting, just a sign in German and English, "Willkommen to Camp Hearn." Work brings dignity. As the prisoners disembark, Weber expects the worst. Instead, he finds barracks with electricity and indoor plumbing, hot showers, flush toilets, things many of them didn't have back in Germany. The contrast with his childhood home in rural Bavaria is stark. America gives its prisoners luxuries his family never possessed. The camp commander, a tired-looking colonel with kind eyes, addresses them through a translator. His words hit Weber like physical blows. The rules are simple. Work 8 hours a day, follow regulations, cause no trouble. In return, 3 substantial meals daily, wages of 80 cents per day in camp script, canteen privileges, recreation, mail from home. Wages. Weber's mind reels. They're going to pay prisoners the same rate American privates earn, $50 a month. Friedrich Becker beside him whispers in disbelief, "They pay us the same as their own soldiers?" The next morning brings another shock. Work supervisors arrive, not soldiers, but ranchers, cotton farmers, cattlemen, men in worn denim and leather boots, faces weathered by sun and wind, men who look like they stepped from the American frontier itself. Rancher John Davidson surveys the group with shrewd eyes. He needs 40 men for his cotton fields. The American agricultural system is feeding half the free world, but American boys are fighting in Italy, preparing for France. Without workers, thousands of acres of Texas cotton will rot in the fields. Davidson points at the biggest, strongest Germans. Then he does something that stops everyone cold. He walks over to Weber, extends his calloused hand, and speaks through the translator. In Texas, men shake hands before working together. Weber stares at the extended hand. 6 months ago, he was fighting Americans in Tunisia, trying to kill them, watching them try to kill him. Now one wants to shake his hand like an equal. The gesture seems impossible, dangerous, revolutionary. But Davidson waits patiently, hand extended, expression open. No hatred in his eyes, no contempt. Just a working man's respect for another working man, regardless of the uniform he once wore. Weber takes the hand. Davidson's grip is firm, calloused, honest, the handshake of someone who spent his life working the land, building something lasting. It's the first time in months that Weber has been treated as a human being, rather than a number, a prisoner, a problem to be managed. "Welcome to Texas," Davidson says in broken German, grinning. "We got work to do." Around them, other ranchers extend hands to other prisoners, cowboys and farmers introducing themselves to former enemies. The ritual is simple but profound, acknowledgement of shared humanity despite everything that's happened, everything they've been taught to believe about each other. As they load onto trucks heading for the cotton fields, Weber catches sight of the camp's recreation hall. Through open windows he hears something impossible. Laughter. American guards and German prisoners playing cards together, sharing cigarettes, attempting conversations in broken English and fractured German. The truck bounces down a dirt road toward Davidson's ranch. Weber watches the landscape roll past. Oil derricks nodding like mechanical birds, cattle grazing on grass that stretches to the horizon, farmhouses with electric lights and telephone wires. This isn't the America of Nazi propaganda. This is something else entirely. A nation so secure in its strength that it can afford to be generous to its enemies, so confident in its values that it doesn't need to brutalize those who oppose them. Weber doesn't understand it yet, but he's beginning to sense a truth that will transform his life. America's greatest weapon isn't its tanks or planes or ships. It's its ability to turn enemies into friends simply by treating them with dignity. The truck turns into Davidson's ranch. Cotton fields stretch to the horizon, white bolls ready for harvest. Weber's real education is about to begin. Dawn breaks over Brazos County like a furnace opening. The cotton fields stretch endlessly under the brutal Texas sun, and Weber learns what American abundance really costs. This isn't the soft, decadent America of Nazi propaganda. This is backbreaking work that builds nations. His hands bleed within the first hour, the cotton bolls tear at his fingers, and the 100-pound sacks feel like they're filled with lead, bent backs, aching muscles, sweat that never stops flowing. But something extraordinary happens in those fields that no propaganda minister could have predicted. Weber works alongside people the Third Reich taught him to despise. Miguel Santos, a Mexican migrant worker, shows him how to pick faster without shredding his hands. Jefferson Washington, a black sharecropper, shares his water when Weber stumbles from heat exhaustion. Mary O'Connor, a poor white tenant farmer's daughter, demonstrates the rhythm that makes the work bearable. The Nazi racial hierarchy crumbles under the Texas sun. Everyone sweats the same. Everyone's back aches the same. Everyone drinks from the same water bucket when Rosa Martinez, the ranch cook, brings it around on her mule. Agua fria, she says, ladling the precious liquid into Weber's cup. She doesn't speak German. He doesn't speak Spanish. But she smiles and gives him an extra portion, the same kindness she shows everyone else. At noon, the dinner bell rings across the fields. Weber expects bread and water, prison rations. Instead, Rosa serves beef stew thick with vegetables, cornbread still warm from the oven, sweet tea so cold it makes his teeth ache, and apple pie that tastes like his grandmother's kitchen in Bavaria. Rosa ladles extra portions onto the German prisoners' plates, her weathered face creased with genuine warmth. Food becomes a universal language, speaking truths that transcend borders and uniforms. Weber will remember this meal for the rest of his life, not because of the food, but because a Mexican woman treats German prisoners with the same dignity she shows everyone else. The Third Reich said this was impossible. The Third Reich was wrong. Friedrich Becker sits beside him on a wooden crate, marveling at the abundance. In Hamburg, my wife hasn't seen meat in months. She stands in ration lines for hours just to get turnips. How do I write to her about apple pie? The question haunts all of them. Their letters home become exercises in careful omission. How can they describe America's abundance to families suffering through Allied bombing? How can they mention the warm clothes and good boots, the meat every day, the wages they're saving, when their loved ones shiver in rubble-filled cities? Weber writes carefully to his mother in Bavaria, "I am well. The Americans treat us according to Geneva Convention. I am learning English." He doesn't mention the electric lights that burn all night, the stores packed with goods, the automobiles every farmer owns. She wouldn't believe him. The censors wouldn't let it through anyway. Saturday night brings another revelation. The recreation hall fills with impossible music, not military marches, not Nazi anthems, but Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys on the radio. Western swing, the sound of America in 1943, cowboys and steel guitars, fiddles and laughter. The German prisoners form their own band, a strange fusion of Bavarian folk melodies and American country music that exists nowhere else in the world. Hans Meller plays accordion while Jim Patterson teaches him San Antonio Rose. The music transcends language, ideology, nationality. It's simply human beings creating beauty together. Weber watches Jewish American guards dancing with Catholic prisoners from Munich, Protestant ranchers sharing cigarettes with former Hitler Youth members. The careful categories that once defined his world dissolve, in the Texas heat and Western swing rhythms. By October, something fundamental has shifted. The Germans no longer think of themselves as prisoners working for enemies. They're part of something larger, the great American agricultural machine that feeds not just a nation, but half the free world. Their labor matters. Their contribution is valued. They're needed, not just tolerated. When the cotton harvest ends, Davidson gathers his workers, American, Mexican, German, black, white, and announces the results. "Best harvest in 20 years, he says, and his voice carries genuine gratitude. "Couldn't have done it without every one of you." He shakes hands with each German prisoner again, the same firm grip, the same honest respect. But now it carries additional meaning. They've earned their place through sweat and labor. They've proven themselves worthy of American respect. Weber looks at his calloused hands, his sun-darkened skin, his growing muscles. He looks different, but more importantly, he feels different. The Nazi ideology that once defined him seems like a fever dream, a sickness he's recovered from. The cotton fields of Texas have taught him something more powerful than any propaganda. Enemies are just strangers you haven't worked beside yet. And once you work beside them, sweat with them, share meals with them, they stop being enemies altogether. They become something else entirely, something the Third Reich never taught him to recognize. They become human. Camp McLean sits like a frontier outpost near Amarillo, where the Great Plains stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Here, the Cowboys aren't metaphorical. They're real, and they need help with thousands of head of cattle. Rancher Thomas Anderson surveys his new workers with barely concealed amazement. Luftwaffe pilots, panzer crews, U-boat sailors. Not one has ever seen a cow up close. "This is going to be interesting," Anderson mutters, adjusting his Stetson. He starts with the basics: how to approach a horse without getting kicked, how to hold a rope without losing fingers, how not to get trampled by a 1,000-pound steer. The Germans are terrified of the animals. The animals are suspicious of the Germans. It's mutual distrust at first sight. Hauptmann Erich Schmidt, former Messerschmitt pilot, stands frozen as Anderson's mare snorts and paws the ground. "She won't hurt you," Anderson says patiently. "Just let her smell your hand." Schmidt extends a shaking hand. The mare nips at his fingers, not maliciously, just curious. Schmidt jerks back, nearly falling. The other cowboys hide their grins behind gloved hands. But Anderson remembers his own son flying B-17s over Germany at this very moment, dropping bombs on boys just like these. War is war, but these prisoners are someone's sons too. Enemy or not, they're here, and cattle don't care about politics. Within weeks, something magical happens. The Germans take to ranching like they were born to it. Maybe it's their military discipline translating perfectly to livestock management. Maybe it's their engineering minds appreciating the complex logistics of moving cattle across vast distances. Maybe it's just that working with animals is honest in a way that war never was. Schmidt becomes Anderson's best horseman within a month. He can rope, brand, and doctor cattle with the skill of men who've done it their whole lives. At night he sketches the landscape, mesas at sunset, longhorns silhouetted against enormous skies, cowboys and Germans working side by side, images that would be impossible anywhere else in the world. "You got the eye," Anderson tells him one evening, studying a drawing of the ranch house at dawn. "Ever think about staying?" Schmidt looks up from his sketch pad, surprised by the question's earnestness. Anderson isn't joking. He genuinely wants this former enemy pilot to remain on his ranch, become part of his extended family. "The Geneva Convention says we must go home when the war ends," Schmidt replies carefully. "Convention's one thing," Anderson says. "What a man wants is another." The conversation plants a seed that will grow in the months ahead. Home to what? Germany is being bombed into rubble. The Wehrmacht is in full retreat. The 1,000-year Reich is crumbling, while Schmidt learns to gentle horses under the endless Texas sky. Christmas Eve, 1944. Something unprecedented happens at the Methodist Church in Amarillo. The pastor, Reverend Hayes, has arranged special permits for German prisoners to attend midnight service. A handful sit in the back pews, self-conscious in their prison uniforms among American families. The hymn is Silent Night, originally Stille Nacht, German words written in Austria over a century ago. The congregation sings in English, but the German prisoners know every word in their native tongue. By the third verse, some are crying, not from sadness, but from the shock of being treated as human beings in an enemy land. Mrs. Hayes approaches them after the service, her arms full of small wrapped packages. "Just cookies and candy," she says through the interpreter. "Merry Christmas, boys." Schmidt accepts his package with trembling hands. Inside, homemade sugar cookies and peppermint sticks, wrapped in paper decorated with angels. At the bottom, a handwritten note. "For Eric, who draws such beautiful pictures, may God bless you and bring you home safely. Mary Hayes." He's never met Mary Hayes. She knows nothing about him except that he's a prisoner who sketches, yet she's given him Christmas gifts, wished him safety, called down God's blessing on his head. The generosity is overwhelming, incomprehensible. Back at camp, Schmidt shows Anderson the cookies, the note. The rancher nods knowingly. "That's Mary Hayes for you. She's been doing that for every foreign boy who comes through here. Doesn't matter where they're from or how they got here. Christmas is Christmas." Anderson pauses, studying Schmidt's face in the lamplight. "You know, my boy Jimmy's probably spending Christmas in some English air base right now, getting ready to fly over your country. Funny world, isn't it?" Schmidt thinks of his own father, somewhere in the ruins of Hamburg, if he's still alive, if their house still stands, if there's anything left to go home to. The war that once seemed glorious now feels like a disease that's infected the entire world. "Maybe," Schmidt says quietly, "when this is all over, your son and I could meet, not as enemies." Anderson's weathered face breaks into a slow smile. "I'd like that, son. I'd like that very much." Outside, snow begins to fall on the Texas plains, rare and beautiful. Schmidt sketches it through the window, fat flakes drifting past the prison camp lights, covering the landscape in pristine white. A German artist capturing American snow, dreaming of a world where enemies become friends over cattle drives and Christmas cookies. The transformation is nearly complete. All that remains is for the war to end and the real test to begin. Whether the bonds forged in American cotton fields and cattle ranches can survive the return to a broken homeland. December 23, 1944. Camp Papago Park, Arizona. 25 U-boat sailors have been digging for 3 months, their tunnel stretching 178 feet beyond the fence. Tonight, they escape into the American desert, carrying dreams of freedom and a plan that's brilliant in its stupidity. Captain Lieutenant Hans Werner Krauss leads the way through the narrow tunnel, his submarine training serving him well in the confined space. Behind him, his men crawl through darkness toward what they believe is liberty. They've built a collapsible boat, studied maps, saved food. Everything is ready. They emerge under a full Arizona moon, blinking like moles in the silver light. Freedom tastes like desert air and possibility. They run toward the Salt River, hearts pounding with excitement, ready to float down to Mexico and live free until Germany wins the war. Then they stop. The Salt River is bone dry, not a drop of water, just sand and rocks stretching into darkness. Their carefully constructed boat is useless. Their plan is dead. The maps they'd stolen were from 1880, before the dams, before irrigation transformed the Arizona desert. "Scheisse," Krauss mutters, staring at the empty riverbed. Around him, 24 sailors realize they're stranded in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, with no water, no real food, and no idea where they are. They scatter into the desert. Within hours, most are lost. The Arizona desert in December is a killer, freezing at night, burning during the day. They have no training for this, no equipment, no understanding of how vast and merciless this landscape can be. Unteroffizier Johann Kramer stumbles through the darkness for 3 days. By the time he collapses at Pete's gas station near Phoenix, he's sunburned, dehydrated, and hallucinating. His lips are cracked, his eyes wild, his tongue swollen. Pete Morrison, the station attendant, is 68 years old with arthritic hands and a kind heart. He takes one look at the German prisoner and doesn't see an enemy. He sees someone's son, lost and dying. "Easy there, boy," Pete says, helping Kramer to a chair. He brings water, makes him drink slowly. "You're one of them escaped Germans, ain't you?" Kramer nods weakly, expecting brutality, punishment, revenge. Instead, Pete makes him a sandwich, thick slices of ham, fresh bread, mustard, real food, given freely to an escaped prisoner. While they wait for the authorities, Pete shares his coffee and talks about his own boy, Tommy, somewhere in the Pacific with the Marines. "Boys will be boys," he says philosophically. "Don't matter what uniform they wear, they all want to go home. 2 fathers' sons, one lost in the desert, one lost in a war." Pete treats Kramer with the same gentleness he'd want someone to show Tommy if he were captured, lost, desperate. Captain Jürgen Wattenberg makes it farthest, all the way to downtown Phoenix. For 5 days he wanders the city streets, amazed by the abundance even in wartime. Restaurants full of food, stores packed with goods, people going about their business without fear, without ration cards, without the constant dread that defines life in wartime Germany. He's sitting on Van Buren Street on January 28th when a street cleaner notices his accent. The police find him exhausted, homesick, ready to return. Even escaped, America is still America. Abundant, comfortable, impossible to hate. "Why'd you try to escape?" the arresting officer asks, genuinely curious. Wattenberg considers the question. Why had he? Duty? Loyalty to the Reich? Or just because he thought he was supposed to? After months of American treatment, the old certainties have crumbled. "I thought it was what I should do," he says finally. "And now?" Wattenberg looks around at Phoenix, the electric lights, the busy streets, the normal life continuing despite the war raging across the world. "Now I think I'd rather just go back to camp and wait for this war to end." Back at Papago Park, the recaptured escapees face their punishment, solitary confinement and reduced rations. But even American punishment is gentler than German discipline. They're given books, allowed to write letters, treated with basic human dignity. Krauss sits in his cell, reflecting on the escape attempt. They'd planned for everything except American abundance. They'd prepared for brutal captivity that never came, expected treatment that would justify their hatred. Instead, they'd found a nation so secure it could afford to be generous, so confident it didn't need to be cruel. The Great Escape had become something else entirely, a metaphor for the futility of fighting against American kindness. You could run, but where would you go? How do you hate people who share their food with you? How do you maintain enemy status with people who treat you like human beings? One by one, the escapees return to camp routines, work details, English lessons, letters home. But something has changed. The escape attempt has paradoxically trapped them in a new understanding. America is not what they were told it would be. It's something else entirely, a place where enemies become guests, where prisoners become workers, where former hatred transforms into grudging respect. The tunnel is filled in, the breach secured. But the real escape has already happened. These men have broken free from the propaganda that once defined their world. They've discovered something more dangerous to totalitarian ideology than any weapon, the truth about their supposed enemies. The truth is simple and devastating. Americans are human beings, capable of both strength and mercy, and if Americans are human, then maybe the war itself is a tragedy rather than a crusade. Maybe there are no master races, no superior peoples, no divine missions. Maybe there are just human beings trying to build decent lives in a difficult world. The thought is more revolutionary than any escape plan. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Germany surrenders unconditionally, and across America, church bells ring in celebration. At Camp Hearn, 500 German prisoners gather around the radio in complete silence. Their country is gone. The Third Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years has lasted 12. Everything they fought for is ash. Weber sits on his bunk trying to process the news. Hitler is dead. Berlin is rubble. The Wehrmacht has ceased to exist. The proud nation that sent him to Africa is now divided among the victorious Allies. There's no Germany to return to, just occupied zones and displaced persons camps. But something else has been born in these American camps, something unexpected and unprecedented. The radio crackles with reports from the European theater, but Weber finds himself thinking about tomorrow's work in Davidson's cotton fields, about the English lessons he's been taking, about the sketch Schmidt showed him of Texas longhorns at sunset. Letters from home have stopped coming entirely. Cities are rubble. Families are scattered or dead. What is there to go back to? Thomas Anderson appears at the camp that evening, carrying a bottle of pre-war bourbon. Good whiskey, saved for special occasions. He finds Schmidt near the stables, brushing down the mare he's grown to love. "Heard the news," Anderson says simply. Schmidt nods, not trusting his voice. "Thought you might want to talk about it." They sit on hay bales in the gathering dusk, passing the bottle between them. The bourbon burns, but it's a clean burn, warming rather than harsh. "My boy Jimmy made it through," Anderson says eventually, "flying B-17s over your country. He'll be coming home soon." "I'm glad," Schmidt says, and means it. I hope he didn't have to drop bombs on anyone like me." Anderson studies his face in the lamplight. "You know, Eric, I've been thinking. When this is all sorted out, when you boys have to head back, I'd like to make you an offer. If you could stay, work the ranch permanently, I'd pay you $100 a month plus room and board. More than you'd make in Germany, assuming there's still a Germany to make money in." The offer hangs in the air between them. Schmidt feels tears prick his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming generosity of it. After everything, Anderson wants him to stay, wants him to become part of the family. "The Geneva Convention says prisoners must be repatriated," Schmidt says quietly. "No exceptions." "Convention's one thing," Anderson replies. "What a man's heart tells him is another." Across Texas, similar conversations are happening. Ranchers write to their congressmen, desperate to keep their German workers. These aren't just prisoners anymore. They're neighbors, friends, the best hands they've ever had. But the law is clear. All prisoners must go home, regardless of circumstances, regardless of preferences, regardless of what home even means anymore. At Camp McLean, Weber receives a letter that somehow made it through the chaos. It's from his mother in Bavaria, written on paper made from tree bark, the words faded and hard to read. Their house was destroyed in a bombing raid. She's living in a displaced persons camp. His father is missing, probably dead. There's no work, little food, no future she can imagine. "Come home quickly," she writes. "There's nothing left here, but at least we'll be together." Weber stares at the letter for a long time. Home to what? Rubble and starvation, Soviet occupation, a defeated nation that will take decades to rebuild? He thinks of Davidson's ranch, of the abundance that surrounds him, of the possibility Anderson mentioned of permanent work. But he also thinks of his mother, alone in a refugee camp, waiting for her son to return. That night, in the recreation hall, someone starts playing Lily Marlene on the accordion. The German prisoners sing along, their voices harmonizing in the Texas night. It's a song about longing, about separation, about love that transcends distance and time. American guards join in, humming the melody they've learned over months of friendship. The music bridges every gap: nationality, language, the history that brought them all to this place. Friedrich Becker raises his coffee cup in a toast. "To the end of war," he says in careful English. "To the dead on all sides. To whatever comes next." They drink camp coffee and talk about the future. Some want to return immediately, to find their families, to help rebuild Germany. Others dream of staying, of becoming Americans, of starting over in a land that's shown them nothing but kindness. Miller tells Anderson through the camp interpreter, though translation is barely needed now, that he wants to come back when he can, if he can. America has shown him something Germany never did, that strength doesn't require cruelty, that power doesn't demand hatred, that enemies can become friends over cotton fields and cattle drives. The repatriation begins slowly in 1946. Trains reverse their journey eastward to the ports, ships to Europe, back to a continent in ruins. But the Germans carry something with them, not military secrets, but something more valuable. They know how Americans farm, how they organize, how they work. They've seen American abundance and understand it's not magic. It's methods, machinery, management, things that can be learned, copied, adapted. More importantly, they know Americans. Not the propaganda caricatures, but real people. Thomas Anderson teaching them to ride, Rosa Martinez ladling extra stew, John Davidson shaking their hands, Pete Morrison giving water to an escaped prisoner. When they tell these stories in defeated Germany, no one believes them. Americans treating prisoners better than Germany treated its own soldiers? Impossible. Paying them wages, teaching them skills, sharing their churches? Fantasy. But the evidence is overwhelming. 425,000 German POWs worked American farms from 1943 to 1946. They harvested millions of dollars in crops, picked cotton by the ton, saved entire harvests that would have rotted. The American agricultural miracle that fed the Allied war effort, German prisoners helped make it possible. And in the process, they discovered something that no ideology could explain, no propaganda could counter. Their enemies were human beings, just like them. Immigration laws change, opening a door that seemed permanently closed. Former prisoners of war can return to America, not as captives this time, but as immigrants seeking the abundance they found in captivity. Weber stands on the deck of a steamship leaving Hamburg, watching the ruins of his homeland fade into gray mist. Behind him lies a Germany still struggling to feed its people, still clearing rubble from city centers, still trying to understand how everything went so wrong. Ahead lies Texas and a rancher who kept his promise. John Davidson waits at the station in Houston, same weathered face, same firm handshake. But now Weber's English is perfect, accented with the slow drawl of East Texas. No translator needed. "Welcome home, Klaus," Davidson says, and the words carry weight beyond their simple meaning. Weber, now Klaus to everyone who knows him, has officially immigrated to America. He'll marry Sarah Mitchell, a local school teacher who fell in love with his sketches of German landscapes. Their children will grow up Texan, rodeo champions, and 4-H winners, never quite believing their father's stories about cotton fields and prisoner-of-war camps. Schmidt returns to Arizona in 1951. Thomas Anderson has work waiting. The same job, the same trust, the same family atmosphere. Within 5 years, Schmidt owns 500 acres near Tucson, raises quarter horses, wins prizes at state fairs. His neighbors know his story. They don't care. In Arizona, you're judged by how you work, not where you're from. Even one of the Papago Park escapees returns legally, opening a small business in Phoenix, not far from where Pete Morrison found him dying in the desert. The irony isn't lost on anyone. A man who once tried to flee America now choosing to make it his permanent home. By 1960, over 5,000 former German prisoners have returned as American immigrants. They open machine shops and restaurants, buy farms and ranches, start families and businesses. Their success stories dot the landscape from Texas to California, living proof that enemies can become neighbors, strangers can become family. December 1963. 20 years after the first prisoners arrived, a reunion is held at Camp Hearn. The old barracks are still standing, though they're used for migrant worker housing now. Former prisoners return with their American wives and children, speaking English with Texas accents, driving Cadillacs and pickup trucks. Thomas Anderson, now in his 70s, stands to address the crowd. His voice is weaker, but his message is clear. You boys came here as enemies. You left as friends. You came back as family. That's the American way. That's the cowboy way. That's the human way. The applause continues for 5 minutes. Former enemies embrace, tears flowing freely. Americans and Germans, cowboys and farmers, united by shared memories of transformation. Schmidt, now Eric Anderson, he'd legally changed his name, brings out his old sketchbooks. The drawings tell the story better than words. Young German soldiers learning to pick cotton, to ride horses, to be human beings again. The progression from suspicion to friendship to family is visible in every sketch. We expected barbarism, he tells the crowd, his English now perfect but still touched with German precision. We found abundance, not just material abundance, abundance of spirit. A nation so secure it could afford to be generous to its enemies, so strong it could show mercy. The reunion becomes an annual tradition. Each year fewer original participants attend, age and time taking their toll. But the children and grandchildren continue coming, fascinated by stories that seem too incredible to be true. Weber's grandson, now a captain in the U.S. Army, listens to the old stories with amazement. How could his grandfather have been an enemy? How could America and Germany have been at war? The man he knows is pure Texan, barbecue master, storyteller, pillar of the local Methodist Church. It was a different time, Weber explains, watching his great-grandchildren play in the Texas dirt where he once picked cotton as a prisoner. We were told we were enemies. We believed it. But enemies are just strangers you haven't worked beside yet. The final reunion takes place in 1983, 40 years after the first cattle train rolled through Texas, carrying German prisoners to an unknown fate. Only a handful of original participants remain, bent with age but bright with memory. They gather one last time in the recreation hall, where they once learned to play Western swing, where they first heard Bob Wills on the radio, where they began the long journey from enemy to friend to family. The statistics tell part of the story: 425,000 German POWs, 700 camps across 46 states, millions of dollars in agricultural labor, 5,000 eventually returning as immigrants. But numbers can't capture the deeper truth, that hatred dissolved by hospitality, propaganda shattered by simple human kindness, enemies transformed by American abundance. As the sun sets over the Texas plains, casting long shadows across the cotton fields where everything began, the old men, American ranchers and German immigrants, share one final toast. To the Cowboys and the Wehrmacht, Schmidt says, raising his glass of sweet tea, to cotton fields and cattle drives, to the war that ended 70 years ago but made us family forever. They drink in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance a train whistle blows, not carrying prisoners this time, but hope. The hope that enemies can become friends, that strangers can become family, that even the deepest divisions can be healed by time, work, and simple human decency. The American experiment had worked in ways the Founding Fathers never imagined. In the cotton fields of Texas and the cattle ranches of Arizona, democracy had proven its greatest truth, that all men are created equal, even those who arrive in cattle cars as prisoners of war. The Cowboys had met the Wehrmacht, and both sides discovered they were simply human beings trying to build decent lives in a difficult world. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.